I am Marsha Natalie Martin.
I'm Raymond Coke, retired minister of United Church and former moderator.
I am Colin Cowan, the minister at the Emmanuel Boscoville Charge of the United Church. And I recently completed a stint as General Secretary for the Council for World Mission.
Sister Hillary.
Hello, I'm Hilary Robertson Hickling. I am a retired lecturer at UWI and former or I'm not sure, former or current member of this task force. No, I'm a member of the task force, but former, I meant the Scottskirk. I played various roles at Scottskirk. Let me leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm Jennifer Martin. I am a part of the Manningsville Oberlin Salisbury Plain Charge of the United Church. I work as the Education in Mission Secretary for the Caribbean and North America Council for Mission, CANACOM, and I serve as the chair of NERM, which means the Northeastern Regional Mission Council. I'm part of the Reparations Committee Task Force.
And Deputy Chair. It's my great pleasure to welcome you, Sister Jennifer, and all of us participating like this in this wonderful conversation. My name is Gordon Cowans. I'm Reverend Dr. Gordon Cowans, retired minister of the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, and currently the chair of our church's Reparations Commission or Reparations Task Force. So maybe we start there because many of our listeners and collaborators would be surprised to know that we are a church that has such a thing like a Reparations Task Force. It was established last year by the highest court of the church, what is referred to as the Synod. And this task force has begun its work, and with that we have been able to work together over this last year and are deeply committed to work as well as we can on this issue of reparations. But reparations in its broadest sense, because for some people, when the word reparations is said, immediately they hear kind of cha-ching, a dollar sign or whatever, and then it clouds all kinds of other things. So let us make it clear from the very beginning that we believe that our task within for the church and among our folk Christian people together gathered as the body of Christ in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands is to bring the issues of freedom, emancipation, freedom, the liberation of a people, body, mind, and spirit. It is about all these issues, and reparations become very much a central part of our work. But we are hoping that in a conversation like this, it will become clear, especially to those who may not be in the church or probably not even being Christians, to know why we do believe and know that this is an important matter for the church to be involved in. Sister Hillary, Dr. Hillary Robertson Hickling, and I, we are hosting together this conversation with 3 of our members from whom we have been privileged to have wonderful presentations in what in Jamaica is the EmancIpendence week between Emancipation Day and Independence Day, August 1 to August 6. And we had these 3 beautiful presentations, and we think that a conversation like this will help to get us deeper into what some of our discussants have been saying to us, and we hope that you will join us in it and find the discussion engaging. You know, I want to start right away with Reverend Raymond. Reverend Raymond presented for us a very interesting reflection on what freedom means to him in faith, as a man of faith for over 6 decades, a minister of our church. And generating faith in the lives of others. And in his early work, he actually began work with the Maroons over 62 years ago. I mean, it is just absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to return to that question to him, because in Jamaica, there is very much a discussion going on now about what the relationship between the Maroons and other Jamaicans should be, and how issues of state and church can affect the life of a people together. But I want to go directly to Reverend Raymond and ask him to tell us a little bit more about the Presbyterian Church's work in the creation of free villages post-emancipation, in post-emancipation Jamaica. And in his talk, he references Goodwill as a place that the Presbyterians did some of the work of helping to create free villages. Why don't you talk a little bit more about that for us, Reverend Raymond?
Well, Goodwill is an outstanding one, because you see, one of our former Governor General, Sir Howard, is a son of Goodwill. He was a son of Goodwill.
Sir Howard Pope.
Yes, he often spoke about Goodwill, you see, as the free village which was founded by the Presbyterian Church. But the Presbyterian Church bought properties. You know, that was the main thing. They bought the properties and subdivided so that the ex-slaves could have places to work, because, you know, the ex-slaves had no right to land. And some were squatters on some of the properties where they were slaves. And I worked at retirement in St. Elizabeth in my first charge 62 years ago. And retirement property was one of those properties bought by the Presbyterian Church. Hundreds of acres and divided. An adjoining property named Trinale was also acquired by the church and divided among the people for work. So there are other places where the church also had properties. Place like Giddy Hall, these are all in St. Elizabeth. Giddy Hall also, where they made lands available to the people.
Can you say whether the records of our church are very clear?
They started work there.
Yes.
They were there in the early days, because when I was there, the building that housed the church and school, what was done in called school chapel, because the school building was used as church, as the church building was used as school from Monday to Friday, and then Sunday was church. Saturday was cleanup day and preparation for church on Sunday.
Yes.
And that building was there for over 100 years until the government built proper school building in a compound.
So you would have no difficulty in agreeing with the view that the church has been engaged in the business of repair, both in potential for land ownership among common people, among previously enslaved people, and also through education. That history of our church in Jamaica has been a part of the work towards repair.
You see, the history of the church is that the church has been involved in education from even before emancipation.
Yes.
The Sunday school was not Bible stories. It was also the 3 R's. That's the only time the slaves had free. So the church used that opportunity to teach them. And that showed how early the church was early in mission work. Because shortly after emancipation, we sent off missionaries to Nigeria. And it's an era which we tend to forget these days by the church, because we were first to send missionaries to Nigeria in as early as 1846, headed by a Scotsman, an Irishman, sponsored by the Presbyterian Church of Scotland, named Hope Waddle, who was a champion for emancipation in Western Jamaica, along with William Knibb and Burchell. They were the main workers in the West championing the liberation cause.
Yes,
So,
as you say, I find that this is so very important, and I want to encourage the likes of you to help us ensure that this generation and generations to come don't lose the knowledge of where the church is. It amazes me how many people have a kind of view that as regards the business of freedom, the church has always been on the wrong side of history. And this, by your very experience and the knowledge that you're sharing with us, means that this is not entirely true at all, and that a more balanced and nuanced understanding has to be there about the church's involvement in these issues.
we could very well say the church were freedom fighters
Yes.
in those days, you know.
Maybe
Maybe we have become too quiet these days, you know.
Well, that's why you're joining us now, you know, because we're talking of the thing. We're talking of the thing. And Sister Jennifer, your presentation was so, and is, because it's very much there in Cyberland. Please, our listeners, make sure you go on to this very YouTube channel of our United Church. And if you have not yet heard the presentations of these speakers, please make sure you do. Sister Jennifer, yours was at such a personal, deep personal level, and then so poetic, so lyrical in its presentation. But for me, you raise this issue of the value to an ordinary person of ownership of real estate. Could you just tell us a little bit more about, you call her Goddess Pearl, Miss Pearl, and what it seemed to you that the time when she was able, through her work in selling market produce, to eventually be able to pay down on a piece of land of her own? It's about the value of ownership of real estate.
Well, thank you very much, my brother. When Reverend Coke was speaking just now, and when he spoke during the time of presentation, he mentioned the fact that our forebears were not landowners. So to have not been landowners disenfranchised persons in many ways. If you didn't have land, you didn't have a vote. If you didn't have a vote, you had practically no say in your life. And if we remember the history from which we came, it was the owners of enslaved people who benefited, and our forebears did not benefit at all. So many of us would have come into modern Jamaica without our parents or grandparents having anything that belonged to them. The community of which I spoke, when I was going to that school, I went there from 61 till 65. There was a place called Wattle Pen, W-A-T-T-L-E, Wattle Pen. And the significance of Wattle Pen was that it was where our earlier Black forebears would have lived. And those houses were constructed out of clay and bamboo plaited together. But there were some other areas called White People Pen, which were big, huge houses in which historically white people had lived. Now, the importance, to return directly to the question that you asked me, this lady of whom I speak, she knew the importance historically of owning land and what it meant to a person's personal liberation. She knew also what it meant to the legacy that you would leave for your children and grandchildren. She was very clear about that. So because the thing is so intertwined and personal and so on, when I went to her funeral in 2011, I was thrilled and amazed, and somewhat I found it humorous. One of her great-granddaughters reporting to the congregation that Granny would sometimes thief with, she said. She would leave without permission when she was like 88, and she would catch the bus and go to Padmore to collect rent from her little house up in the country.
Yes.
Thrilled me because I was present when she announced the acquisition of this piece of land. Yes. So the younger generation would have missed what I recorded. All that they can remember is that Granny has a house up in the country and it is far, so Granny will go up there. But they had now become accustomed to living in, let's say, physically tight circumstances. But yet they knew that their little legacy was elsewhere because Granny had told them. So she understood for historical reasons what it meant not to have land. And she knew the value and beauty of having land. And that is why she went for it and protected the land title as she did.
And that is why I think these conversations are so important. And I hope you will help us to bring the conversation back to this issue about the current condition of Jamaica in relation to ordinary people who do not own any real estate. That I don't know if as a nation, we are talking enough with each other about what it means to somebody when you do in fact own a little piece of the rock. Yes. And that when people ask us the questions about, so in this modern time, 2022, what all this whole talk about slavery and emancipation, how does it matter? Well, doesn't it really, really matter if the issue of generational wealth is in fact, or the lack of it is reflected by the very fact that we were made to start from nothing, but we will come back to it.
Okay.
Colin, you are returning and have returned. I hear that you are the minister of a relatively small church up in St. Mary, and I know that you're not short of people to look after in St. Mary here in Jamaica, but there was a time not so long ago when you were the general secretary of this international organization called the CWM. Would you help our listeners just to get a sense of what the CWM is and why is a conversation like we are having around the matter of reparations, why this would be such a significant thing to us as a church? What's the CWM?
Thank you. When I joined the Council for World Mission, somebody said to me, how in God's world could somebody like you join an organization like that?
Yes.
And that because they were referring to the antecedent body, the London Missionary Society. An organization that has done tremendous work. The London Missionary Society started in a little coffee shop in London in 1795. And it was a group of young men who felt fired up for the cause of the gospel, felt that they needed to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. And they made that decision and they set out on that mission to take the gospel to places like the Caribbean, to Africa, to the Pacific, and all across Asia, East and South. And that organization grew to become a very vibrant, dynamic organization that was involved not only in the spread of the gospel, but in education, in healthcare, and in community development. The London Missionary Society did not set out to plant churches or to build churches. It set out to share the gospel of God's love through Jesus Christ and to invite people into a relationship with Jesus Christ. But over time, it became organized and structured into denominations. And so in 1977, this organization, along with two others from within the Europe setting, came together to form what we now know as the Council for World Mission. At that time, it was because the churches that were part of the London Missionary Society had grown, had come of age, and felt that inasmuch as we were receiving missionaries from Europe, we were birthing missionaries in different parts of the world who also, we believe, could share the gospel with the people of Europe as well. And so there was even a call from Africa for a moratorium on missionaries to that part of the world. And that started a conversation that led to a consultation in Singapore in 1975. And then in 1977, the Council for World Mission was born. And it was the idea of bringing together the member churches to share the best of what they had, the gift of themselves as people, the gift of ideas and insights, and the gift of money. But the London Missionary Society, in as much as it had this wonderful zeal to spread the gospel, got co-opted into the web of the colonizers, whose interest was in ensuring that they could enslave as many people as possible for profit making. And over time, the London Missionary Society got involved in the slave trade. And we were actually trading within there were members of our community, certainly members of the officers' corps of the London Missionary Society, who were themselves slave owners, even right here in Jamaica. And the London Missionary Society profited in a variety of other ways as well, even using the slaves on their deputation to tell stories about what they were doing. And some of the missionaries, not all, but some of the missionaries got caught in that web and became involved in a kind of sharing of the gospel that was less about liberating the enslaved people and more about keeping them subservient. So one of the instructions, for example, that was given to Smith, to John Smith, the missionary in Guyana at the time, is this. He said, "Not a word must escape you in public or in private, which might render the slaves displeased with their masters or dissatisfied with their station. You are not sent to relieve them from their servile condition, but to afford them the consolation of religion." So religion was being used as a tool to support and to advance the slave trade.
So this was the antecedent organization that you then, yourself, a descendant of formerly enslaved people. Yeah. This is the organization that you became the general secretary of?
That is correct. And that is why when we then started to talk about doing justice and pursuing peace, the question was, how can you do that without taking into account this very hostile history of which you're a part?
So what did you do? You launched a kind of period of study and introspection within the structures of the Council for World Mission?
We pulled together a team of persons from around the regions of CWM, and particularly from the Caribbean, from Europe, and from Africa. And that team of persons, we call it a hearing group. And we took the journey starting in London, and from London to Accra in Ghana, where our foreparents came from to these shores, and then to the Caribbean itself, and from there to the United States of America. So there were these 4 hearings in which we wanted to get a sense of what the legacies of slavery were, how people were affected by the trade in African people, and how this continued to affect the way we live our lives today. So that's where it started. One of the things that we were told when we visited Ghana was from a chief who said, "Please do not commercialize our story. So many have come before you, and we have told them our story, and all that has happened is that they make big money out of our story. Please do something about it." So we were under a kind of a mandate, a moral mandate, to ensure that we were going to make the stories that we heard something that could make a difference in terms of how we continue the journey today.
And this work was going on as pre-Black Lives Matter movement years and pre the death of murder of George Floyd in the United States. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, long before that. What happened when in the time when George Floyd was so brutally murdered, we were able to say, but here, this is part of our story. This is part of what we have already been saying. And even some of our white sisters and brothers who failed to grasp what we were saying at the beginning, and thankfully many of them came on board as the conversation continued, but some of them were reticent to become part of the conversation in the early because they felt we were just really hashing up some things that were dead and buried already, and we should not be going back there. By the time by the time the George Floyd situation came on board, they began to see even more clearly how wrong they were and how necessary it was for us to continue this conversation.
So this organization is a 32 denominational member body came to a decision. Tell our viewers just a little then about what was the concluding decision. Like, tell us, what did this CWM then say? At the very least, this we must do.
Yeah. So once we received the story, once we received the stories and we started to talk about what that meant, we kind of pulled together a very comprehensive report on what we heard and what the implications of what we heard were. And we brought that to our board to request them to engage with us. And the board had some challenges receiving the report. Not so much the report. I think the board was comfortable hearing the report. They were uncomfortable with some of the language that we were using. They became uncomfortable, for example, when we began to use language like white people and black people, and they would rather first to just say sisters and brothers. But white, we need to name white because it is not individuals we're naming here. Is a system. It is white privilege that we're naming. It is the ideology that whites are superior to blacks. That is the ideology that need to be exposed. And so it is again along those lines that we made our commitment, our report to the board. And after a while, the board became very committed to listening and also to responding. The board took a resolution in 2018, which goes along the line of this, that in the company of Christ, the board offers itself to the task of restorative and racial justice, and so seek a restorative process which includes reparation for the extent to which LMS/CWM resources, materials, and policies profited from racism and enslavement. So that was the start of the resolution. We said, to this end, the board will take the necessary steps to agree a sum which properly recognizes the extent of our legacies from slavery, and create a financial mechanism through which reparation can be made, taking note of the report's recommendations. So, and it continues. But basically, what the board did was to say, we are coming on board. And we are coming on board in a variety of ways. We are going to make, we're going to come public and say we were wrong as an organization.
Wow, wow. So for a Christian missionary, international missionary society to come to the conclusion after a time of introspection and repentance, to be willing to apologize, and then to say we set aside material resources to shore up the sense that we are not just about talk, but that we believe that we should participate in the repair work. I think that is a rather fantastic position to have come to, and at the time when the CWM takes a decision like that.
Yeah. No, I'm grateful that we got to that place, and it brought tears. It literally brought tears to our eyes when the board agreed that the initial sum that they would commit to this cause was £10 million.
Yes, £10 million sterling as an initial sum to say we mean business about this.
And basically to say that it is a start, and that we wanted this fund to be spent in a way that did not bind us. In other words, it should not be a fund that was going to be spent by us on ourselves, but that there should be a special task force that was going to think through how these funds were going to be spent to advance the cause.
Bless the Lord for your ministry, and may your efforts continue to please the God of justice. Sailor, why don't I just hand it over to you? Because especially when Reverend Colley talks about the discomfort in among our brothers and sisters, including the discomfort in our own locations, does it surprise you that when the issues of emancipation, freedom, reparations, these kinds of things get raised within the church, that it also brings a certain amount of emotional response that can, in fact, raise tensions?
Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity. I heard the presentations, and I think this year, and I think that Gordon, before the end of today, you should say something about what we had done last year,
Yes.
Because this is a process of work.
Indeed.
The fact is that the church was literally in bed with capitalism. And therefore, there was also counter forces. And I'm very happy to be listening to this, because in all of my many years of living, some of this information was unknown to me, like goodwill and so on.
Yes.
What I think part of the reparation requires is that we need to be able to provide information for people. Because part of the work of the white supremacists or the white privilege is to suppress information.
Yes.
And to erase, and the whole issue of erasure. And so the fact that people have difficulty hearing something until George Floyd's murder, for example, and I mean, George Floyd clearly must be one of the great martyrs of history, that forced people who had been previously refusing to face their madness. And I think that we are at a very important moment in history, which allows us to speak of these things, both within a church and in the broader world. I mean, we are operating at a time when the Pope has been forced to go to Canada to admit a number of things. People feel it is not complete and not whatever, because the indigenous people have suffered tremendously from the work of the Catholic Church. Secondly, I think in England, United Reformed Church has also made a public statement.
Yes,
because people who were normally keeping this as a secret are now being forced to speak in public about their role and what they intend to do and have to do to repair things, because things can be repaired.
Yes.
So we need to seize this moment. And for some reason, I was reading about God is my portion. And of course, it's all about land, the land that the people receive.
Yes.
So something that this church has to do is to admit to the wider public, including the 900,000 Jamaicans who are, what do you call it, squatting?
So-called squatters.
Yes, so yes, that God's portion includes people having a place, an inheritance, a place to live,
Amen.
a place to work,
Amen.
a place to grow their food, and a place to contain the environment. And there are actually 2 or 3 things that came up. I loved the background, and I don't know where Reverend Coke was when he was speaking, looking at a panoramic view, because each of our speakers spoke in the context of a place.
Yes.
Colin was in his mother's garden.
Yes.
And was lovingly taking care of the environment and taking care of the flowers, and clearly his mother had set this area apart. Jennifer was talking about this person and her pursuit of the ownership of land. If we're saying that God's portion includes people possessing their own land, in other words, a place where their neighbor's stream could be buried,
yes,
a place that they could link, especially people who had become landless because they had been removed from the land where they were born and belonged to a new world. And this is even more complicated because, Colin, you would have seen the people who are being oppressed as a result of Windrush, who have been triply or doubly disenfranchised and made homeless 2 and 3 and 4 times. So this whole business about God's portion and land is something that I need to hear the preachers speaking about, because many of the times freedom and so on are discussed in very abstract ways.
Yes.
But we're talking about people, you don't even have somewhere to bury your dead. You don't have anywhere to grow your food. You don't have anywhere to live. And those are the kind of critical things that are so important. So what I'm saying is that this committee will have to continue its prophetic work. And yes, we're going to expect that there's going to be pushback, as there has been pushback in every area, because people don't want to have to acknowledge that some of these wrongs were done, were righted. I'm reading the what's it called? White Debt?
White Debt, yes.
In which a man who is of partial Jewish heritage recognized what was done in the Jewish world, but he's had to find out more about the English heritage part of things. So I hope I'm making sense in terms of this process. The conversation has to take place, and I'm happy it's widening, because part of the reason why we have some of these problems is because of our failure. We're in denial. We're in denial. And part of it is that everyone here has to use his or her power and the power that people possess to expand the dialogue. Because a lot of the young people today, they're saying there are young people, young men who are doing things because them are go dead, fatherless crew, and people who have nothing to lose.
Nothing
really.
to live for.
Nothing to live for. So therefore, I think we need to connect this thing. If you don't even own a square of land, have you got something to live for? The final comment I want to make, as I said, in terms of the sweep of the three presenters, where they were, what they spoke about. It is in my late adulthood that I understand that my grandfather had the vote in Ponside in Hanover. And he was able to have the vote because he had gone and worked in Cuba and Costa Rica and Panama. And many people, including his brother, lost their lives. He lost a brother who drowned in Panama in the rapids.
Yes.
The lengths to which people went in order to possess a space. So he didn't want to be a carpenter, which he was. And so he went to do this work to own land. And so therefore the whole business about the migrant experience is something that I think the church has to deal with. And I think about the work, not only of the people who went as quote unquote missionaries to Africa, but people like Reverend Saunders who went somewhere in England again. Where was it again?
I think she might have been in Birmingham at once.
And then she was in somewhere further north. I don't remember where.
Yes.
But part of what we're saying is some are looking to land on the moon, but we're looking at land on the land that many people have no access to.
Yes.
And that the whole question of the gods and the portion is something that is a critical matter. That I hope that the discussion with the ministers in training and the laity and all those people will be exposed to and understanding that people without land are almost not living because they're not connected to anywhere in the world.
Yes.
And so the Council for World Mission should be congratulated, but I hope that is not because people like Colin are now gone that we are having this backsliding, to use a church word. By the way, I'm able to say this thing because I'm not a church employee. And
oh yes, no, that's why we love to have Christians who are totally emancipated and free and know that your voice matters. But
and the last thing I want to say is that the whole question about the chapel, which Reverend Coke spoke about, where the church and school were one. I think we really need to return to that model which allows us to utilize the facilities more appropriately. Because I think the church will have to fight the government over the control of the schools and so on. I can use this kind of word because I say I'm retired, I'm a widow, I'm this, I'm that, and some of the nonsense that's going on, I think I replaced Reverend Coke as the chair of the Meadowbrook board. And honestly, I had to say to a politician who called me about getting somebody in recently. Yes. I said the curves are on the board, they're providing less and less resources, but but the chapel needs to be reinforced, I would like to say. Let me stop now.
Yeah, no, I hear you loud and clear.
Could I raise a point?
Yes, Reverend Raymond, come in, please.
Coming in the whole issue of land.
Yes.
Coming out of this discussion. Couldn't the church, we have a large tract of lands, in many parts of the island. couldn't the church make some of this land available to landless people?
Yes.
Even at nominal cost, so you don't really
Yes.
give them for nothing, but
Yes.
maybe a nominal cost. Because I know properties that are just there, people work it without any
Yeah.
compensation to the church,
Yes.
you know, and whether or not we shouldn't think of this. I don't know whether Colin mentioned the CWM putting up funds for this, for the thing, whether or not maybe any of that funds could be available to maybe help to survey land and maybe subdivide land or something like that.
Well, you know, Reverend Raymond, you are known in our church as a visionary, and people who found out that we own Meadowrest, for example, would need to know, you know, the mind of a person like you who sees what is possible or decades before. So I trust that what you have just said is almost like speaking into being what the task force has on its agenda, because part of the work of us, and I wanted to raise that for general comment as well, that if indeed the organization, the international organization, and other, now we notice other missionary societies, but also other denominational leadership overseas from mostly Britain, are facing up to the issues of emancipation and reparations and so forth, then those of us who are the descendants of the previously enslaved people must see our role as being now the recipient, you know, how to graciously accept apologies, and then also to utilize those resources for the benefit of the largest number of our brothers and sisters, people of Jamaica and the Caribbean. And what greater way that we could use to make this possible than in collaboration with our international ecumenical body to, at the local level, utilize some of the resources we have available to us and to actually be contributing some more to the work of repair. So I hope you know that we're going to come to you to help us to ensure that we have some more of the details of the history of the repair work that Presbyterians, for example, had done in the free villages, so that we get the stories being written right, because many of us in this generation and even generations to come don't know about the amount of the repair work that has already been done. And I hope that what you have just said will be a way in which you speak into being for the immediate present and for future generations, more contribution to the repair work by helping people.
Can I just say one more thing?
Enslaved, formerly enslaved people to own land. Yes, Cecilia, speak.
I would like to ask how many of the people here present have been to Goodwill?
Yeah, I have been.
I have not.
You have been?
Yes.
Because you see, wherever the free village is, do the people in Goodwill know? Do the people in whichever the name of the place know? Because we had been talking at the large, at the CWM led event group Gordon.
Across the Caribbean, yes.
Yes. We had been talking about going to this place in Trelawney, and we've talked about it. That is one side of the picture, because we're saying also on the other side of the picture, there were lands which were bought and subdivided, and people live there, and there's a whole process that we need to be aware of. And so we have been, in a sense, hankering after the CWM one man, whatever his thing. But we have not, because I've never heard about Goodwill before.
Right,
so,
at the local level.
And of course, there is my ignorance. But
no. It is not well, perhaps enough known, and the details of this is, and Reverend Raymond is such a generous man with his knowledge. I mean, I'm not going to tell tales out of school, but he's helping us to reclaim much of our history. But you know, as Jamaicans, how we have tended to be very slight with our histories, and that is why I'm so glad that all of you speakers have brought into our faces. This is a part of our story. We must know our own story. Yes, Raymond.
I'm agreeing with you.
Sister Jennifer.
Can I come in?
Yes, Colin, and then Jennifer.
Yeah. So I'll make a couple of comments. One is that part of the setback we've had with our proposal within the CWM context when I was there was some of our churches who were uncomfortable with our going public to apologize for what we have done and actually to release funds in this respect, because they said once we do that as CWM, if the demand might be on member churches to do likewise, and some people are uncomfortable with this idea that Reverend Coke is just raising about letting go of land. People have literally said this, that we have large parcels of land and we do not want anybody to come to us and say they want to claim this land. So that is part of the barrier that we came upon. And you, Reverend Gordon, you will also know that this conversation is not new within the context of the United Church either, because this conversation has been raised before about how land within the purview of the United Church could be used differently. And there has
yes,
been,
I remember.
I'm happy that it is coming up again, because it's a critical question. Now, in a place like Singapore, where I lived for some time, housing was not the privilege of a few. Housing was regarded as a right for all. And so you will find that all people in Singapore, they don't own land, but they own a roof over their head. And so they have because it's not a lot of land space that they have, what they do, they go up. And the land is owned by the government or by some establishment and regularized and regulated by the government itself. But everybody has a right to even a one-bedroom house. And Jamaica has to come to the place where we do that. Now,
must come to it.
True that in the 1970s, and that's why when I listen, for example, to the conversation in Denby on Emancipation Day, I chuckle a little bit, because the same thing about eat what you grow and grow what you eat is the same conversation that we were having in the 70s. And people left this country. People took their resources out of this country. The people did not participate in the program as it was presented then, and we're still there today after all these years. So there's a lot that we need to wrestle with, because we became independent in 1962. Between 1962 and the early 70s, we're still kind of, if you will, living off the fact, if there was any, of what the residue of the English people are still here and so on. We started to think through the economic implication of political independence in the 70s, and people scorned it. And so the groundswell for coming together of the people to build a community in which everybody participated, where the land was shared, where education was free, where everybody could participate and build a community for all of us. That did not happen. We are there again, thankfully. And I pray that this time we'll make some progress.
Yes, indeed. And as a people, we have reduced too much that is too important to what I call small p politics. So it seems to me that here is the church now having a tremendous opportunity to speak about God's cause in a way, and to, in a way, take the lead and be exemplar of how to bring justice and reconciliation into the world. Sister Jennifer?
Patience, yes. Were you asking me a specific question?
No, I wanted to know whether you wanted to tap in onto the land matter, and then probably Sister Marsha wants also to comment.
Yes.
Or any other comment.
I wanted to tap into the land matter, because I'm looking at this question of land matter over the years. What I find alarming is that it is perfectly easy to discuss the historical process, which we must, to discuss what governments should do, which we must, and to speak of what the church ought to do, which we must. But at the end of the day, what alarms me totally, having grown up, and I kind of bring things down to the small to make sense of them. So I grew up on Waterloo Road, Upper Waterloo Road, where Mega Mart is located today. That's the home address on my birth certificate. And so I remember Annette Crescent, Bedford Crescent. I remember the Colorus Cemetery. I remember all of those areas. And I remember when Gibraltar Lane, the lane from which Mrs. Johnson got the pearl lived, there were only a few houses in there, you know. And all of those places now are so crowded. I remember when Sandy Gully Bridge, when there were practically no houses along the Gully Bank, across the city. I remember it very clearly. One, people had respect and fear for authority. Two, people were still hopeful. I think there was a greater hope that governments would do more for housing. I remember Buckowall, Tivoli, when the really dreadful conditions under which people are living, those houses were taken down, and these spanking new buildings come up. Colin spoke a while ago about coming full circle. I think we have gone around the houses 10 times now. When I travel along Mannings Hill Road now and see the volume of houses along Gully Banks, Waterloo Road, various places, what it says to me is that in 60 years, rather than increasing the courage, the hope, the faith of people in a belief that the system will sell to them, will help them to obtain even small houses, quads or so, that hope is fading fast. And so now there's a particular supermarket along Mannings Hill Road facing Border Avenue in that general direction, where the owners have to put up a massive chain, because at night, the people who have filled the Gully Banks with houses, of course they have nowhere to park, because the Gully Banks were never meant to be housing people. The supermarket owners will possibly not have use of their parking space when their customers come in the morning. At the same time, we are seeing the prices of housing going so out of hand that on a place, a simple road like Ruthven Road, a 2-bedroom apartment recently was $47 million. Charlton Crescent, part of that kind of road that I knew as a child, they have houses around that area now for $60 million Jamaican dollars. We know what minimum wage is. So more and more, rather than people being hopeful that they'll get a land title one day, people are beginning to think, I can buy a car, I can buy something else, I can go away. But house ownership in terms of having a land title, regardless of what the government figures will show, more and more people are simply building up. The very government of the country now, during the last election campaign, I heard one very highly placed official telling people about drawing on a room to a house. You know what that means? So you start with one little boardroom and you buy some more ply and you expand the house. And so you draw it on and you spread it more and more. So you don't own the land, the building is not secure, it is not good to protect you against hurricanes and so on. And then the density during COVID, some of the news reports that I saw, the kind of conditions, the physical proximity of buildings, as more and more people capture land. There are some houses in the city now, they are not apartment buildings, and people cannot even walk between the buildings. So in a convoluted kind of way, I'm saying that the government will count up and say, well, in Hayes, Clarendon, or in Giddy Hall or whatever, we made 10 houses this year. But the mass of the population, which is described as squatters or homeless, are not being given enough hope. And
not being impacted enough, yes.
Not being impacted enough. And I do believe that despite the fact that we live in a situation where monetary resources are not plenty, I think if elected officials were more serious about giving people the dignity of housing, but not giving free, permitting you to pay, making it possible for you to pay, arresting inner city decay of buildings. It's a whole mass of issues colliding. And the reason that the issues continue to collide is that we are not, I think, dedicated enough to understand from whence we came.
I hear you.
And I kind of finish up here in a quick second. So one of the things that alarms me about the housing crisis that we have is that there are many Jamaicans who have no address. In other words, there's a mass. I live in West Rural. We live in West Rural St. Andrew in a working class community, and houses just spring up. So some of the inner city problems that arise, that they talk about top gully and bottom gully and whatever, will arise in West Rural St. Andrew and places because in time, because people cannot purchase land. There's not enough land to purchase. Wages and requirements to purchase land are out of sync. So many people are ignoring any system at all. So long as they can draw on tools, that is what they will do. And so, but we really ought not to just sit down and just watch the thing just go haywire. And then every year you hear some little official saying we built 10 houses in Giddy Hall. What is that?
So at the heart of your presentation was this hope. And I know you recorded it at our own Hope United Church.
Yes,
and at the very center of your presentation was this matter of hope. I mean, just what a wonderful thing it would be if the church, in its own small way, took a lead in this matter and, in fact, helped our international brothers and sisters to be a part of this repair with the matter of ownership of real estate, land ownership, and how the dignity that it brings to a person and can bolster in a human being when in fact they are a part owner of some small part of this rock. I wonder if Sister Marsha,
Marsha, lend me 30 every seconds.
Yes, Sister Jennifer and then Sister Marsha, and then we come back.
Right. Okay, so let her go and then I come back. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Sister Jennifer.
Oh, I was saying that I wanted you to scratch one word from your remarks just now. The church in a small way.
Yes,
the church.
Small, however small.
No, but I don't want the word small in it. The church is about hope.
Yes.
And what is killing our country, literally, not figuratively.
Yes.
You know, that nothing to live for passive. Hear about that passive.
Indeed.
What you mean? You get up every day and there is nothing for you to live for. Hillary touched on it earlier, and as did you. It is how we are going to delve more deeply into the matter of hope. You see, land is one thing, and it's one important thing. But it is a matter of hope. How do you hope in the present? How do you hope in your own self? How do you hope for your children and your grandchildren yet unborn? It is the hope that lives. You know why this lady I wrote about, why she's so significant to me? She gave me my middle name. I have a very, very dreadful middle name. It's Pandora. Pandora brought trouble into the world. But the part two of the story that many people don't remember is that when she saw the trouble escaping, she played on and she captured hope. So hope did not escape. Hope did not. Troubles escaped, but hope did not. If we allow hope to escape, the mayhem and the murder that we see, it doesn't matter what else the government, what else they say, they're bringing in more guns, more police, more whatever.
Yes. Oh no, but I hear you loud and clear, and I want you to know how clearly I hear you, because and the fact that you bring it in the context of this use of the word small, in fact, that smallness, at least in my way of using it, is about planting seeds of hope. Remember, the largest of trees and at the heart of the Christian gospel is that the smallest of seed has the potential to bring forth this large embracing tree. And so that is exactly, in fact, what I meant, that sometimes, and no, but let's deal with the small a little bit, because sometimes one of the things that hold us back from doing things. And sometimes we are criticized for saying, oh, but what you're doing is such a quote unquote small thing. And yet, if indeed what you are planting is a seed of hope, you then can become a sort of exemplar. When the CWM sets aside to its initial sum of 10 million pounds, there are those out there who are going to say, oh, but what can 10 million pounds sterling do? Yeah, and would respond to what in fact should be seen, at least seen by me, as a seed of hope that can spur others as an exemplar. Remember, we are talking within church. Can you imagine if states parties were to pick up on some of what we are talking about now and actually say, but we are the ones who can in fact scale it up. When Mr. Cameron came here from Britain to try and give us a prison which we did not want, if he were to take this matter that the housing of our people is a significant part of the repair, and if somehow our seeds could be the seeds that send the right signals into the states parties, then what I am wanting to say is that whatever efforts we bring to it can indeed be that very planting of the seeds of hope for which you are so strong in reminding us, not where there is life, there is hope, is that hope must be engaged in order that life can be worth living. Yes, Sister Marsha.
I am just very grateful to be seated in this space and hearing this rich conversation. I had the privilege of listening on our YouTube channel as Reverend Cope, Dr. Cowan, and Auntie Jennifer is what I call her, as they spoke, and to know that this forms part of that as a continuation of the conversation. As each of you spoke, I jotted down words. I'm always jotting down something. And a number of things became some of them sticking points, nevertheless very important. It is how we help our mid to late 30-year-olds understand exactly what we mean when we say reparations. It is how we help them to know about money in the context of reparations and not just hear the kaching you spoke about when you started the conversations, and how we share these stories that Reverend Cope helped us to appreciate a little bit more, as well as other stories. When we begin to share those stories and to help these younger persons to build the kinds of expectations that would lead us to have a more responsible society, so that we don't find ourselves in the cycle and circle of 50 years from now, or let's say 60, we're celebrating 60 years, going back to talk about reparations, a conversation that started so long ago. And although we have made some significant advancements, we are not yet at the place where our mid and late 30-year-olds get it, so that they themselves don't even fall in the same trap. Because if we look at the trends that we're seeing now, if we say scamming, right there, maybe 30 years from now, we're going to need a conversation about reparation. These our people are thieving from some other people. So we may talk about slavery and how we need to come to reparation conversation, but we now need to also begin to talk about thieving and how we come to reparation. The basic admission of guilt and the contriteness and the sorrow about our actions and the repairs that our sister Hilary spoke about, it can be repaired. And we have to talk about the kinds of strategies that would best help these younger persons who are already in a kind of cemented frame that locks out any conversation beyond money. And I believe if we continue to push this kind of conversation, not just among our church people and the younger ones among us, but generally, we are bound to gain some success, make great strides, and achieve more.
Wonderful. You know, Ms. Marsha, that's why young people like you on the conversation here, you know, because
Yes, sir.
speaking for
Yes, sir.
myself, it's not a
Yes, sir.
conversation just with me and me as a old people. Yeah, I'm very glad that you're on it. And I beg you to tell the young people that we are discussing these matters, and we definitely want, in fact, I want to use this opportunity to tell our viewers that our task force is very conscious of the importance of the younger voices, both so that their ears are with us, but also that their inputs, very valuable inputs from young people. And our young videographer called Nana Moses, really, Reverend Kevin Calvert of the United Church, has presented a beautiful presentation, as painful as it might be, but it is part of our reality and the way he helps us to speak our story. And some folk missed it when it was presented last Sunday. Next week Sunday, I think that is must be about the 14th of August, it will be shown again. Please watch this space and make sure you see it, because it's not going to be left up on the platform. Once it goes up, it's going to come down. So please see it. And then also to hear the deep and genuine passion we have for this conversation to continue and to continue with the young, because our task force actually has designed a schools program, which we are going to pilot with 2 of our high schools. The United Church has, as Reverend Coke reminded us, has been involved in education all through these many decades, even centuries. And 2 of our schools are going to be the pilot for engaging, especially senior students, in, you know, the things that the youth can do for us, a cultural expression of what these matters of reparations, freedom, emancipation could mean for them. And this will be done in the first term of the very next year, which is 2022-23 school year. So watch this space and know that the church is engaging and trying to engage as many of our young people in these matters, and we really want to encourage people to come forward. This series is only the second in a series which we hope will go on for as however long into posterity as it needs to go. And I say it needs to go, which I hope at one stage we will be reflecting on the tremendous work of the reparations and how much as a people we have developed using the reparations monies that hopefully the state's parties, maybe not entirely in my lifetime, but will begin in my lifetime to repay. But these sessions will go on. And last year, we had a series of discussions as well, which were very well received. And we are committed within the task force to actually presenting both this year and last year's work together in a kind of journal. We are going to be developing a journal for the Reparations Task Force. So we are in this for the long haul. But enough from me now, because what time is far spent, and how time flies when you're having fun. You're a wonderful set of people to have had fun with. So I want to hand over to Sister Hillary and invite her closing comments, and then ask for our speakers to make their closing comments in whatever way they desire so to do, in the order of Reverend Raymond, Sister Jennifer, and Reverend Colin. And then I might ask Reverend Colin, in addition to whatever else he's going to say, to then pray God's blessing, his closing prayers for us. Because one of the things that Colin has said, which I think the church wants to say in this matter, is that we don't come to the reparations issue as if we're at war with someone. We do indeed believe that the actions towards reparation, this repair work that we must do, we can do it together, and the church can bring a reconciling spirit into the work of bringing humankind, peoples of all kinds, closer together as one. Let me invite you then to make your closing comments as you saw.
Okay, I am going because there's a 4-year-old who is being taken care of by someone in my house at the moment, and he has been very good so far.
Praise God.
So if I have to leave, you will understand. But this conversation has to go on. I think the church needs to have a plan and recognize that housing has been so politicized in Jamaica that we now have, I saw a figure, and I hope I was wrong when I read it, garrisons, which are essentially ways of politicizing people's desperate need for housing in exchange for patronage and votes. I therefore would like to suggest that we need to map out the free villages. I think we need to create do some new thinking about housing. We certainly should be engaging people like Dr. Pat Green of the School of Architects. And I want us, increasingly I'm saying we need to under speak and over deliver.
Yes, yes, yes. Get on with it.
Yes.
Get on with it, man. Get on with
So, so I think we must be very careful in terms of how we are expressing and articulating this, because these politicians run away with things. But there's a beautiful thing about the name of goodwill and Howard Cook in that area, because that part of the island, apparently there are 20 squatter settlements in Montego Bay.
Alone.
20.
Yes.
Where we have built hotels and there's nowhere for the people to live, with the results that we're having, all those things.
Yes.
So yes, I hear the young man outside now. Yes, calling. I'm coming. So I have to go. So I'm just saying that that we have to continue to deal with the housing and to deal with whether they're calling modern land settlements or whatever we want to call them. But we have to ring fence the politician, because I'm told that some of the time they tell people, go on the land over there, which belongs to the church. They will do it.
Yes.
And so we need to be very clever. And here I'm going to be even heretic. I hear somebody like Mr. Warmington is a member of the United Church. I think he's a dreadful.
He is. He worships
That's my
St.
view, of
Stephen's.
course, So I have to leave now. So
bless you real good, and thank you so much. Thank you for your insightful contributions. Always.
Yes. Come in. Thank you.
Blessings. Blessings. This is Brother Raymond.
Yes, I think that we need to continue the conversation and the whole matter of land and housing.
Yes.
You know, there's a land we call a real estate committee, as you know, and has been set up to look at the church properties.
Yes.
And you, Mr. Chairman, has read some time ago about the church lands.
Yes.
You had raised issues of whether we should not look about production on some of these lands. So we really need to do some serious, because I know properties that are just there and people are making all kind of use of them and of no benefit to the church and the wider community. And I think that we should follow through on that. I don't know if you want to follow through any further on the matter of the Maroons.
Yes, indeed we would. Please,
because I don't know if it's youthful exuberance that has caused the present chief to be so vocal and aggressive these days. But the time when I worked there, people were, the chief was an elder of the church.
Yes.
Yes, with an elder of the church, and then the families, they were very involved in the church, and they were peace-loving and caring people. They were hardworking. They worked a lot in our culture, and I mentioned in my talk that they produce the best sugar cane in the area.
Yes.
So that Appleton Estate used less tons of their sugar cane to produce a ton of sugar.
So productivity was high. Yes.
I doubt today. Well, I left there 58 years ago. So I doubt whether they are producing, because I think some had gone into the ganja production, you know, the younger generation had gone into that. But in the Constitution, Jamaican Constitution, the Jamaican government had a treaty with the Maroons in 1939, you know. And 1939 was a treaty with them following on the British thing, which gave them their rights. But it states clearly that they had full, when independence came, they had full rights as citizens of Jamaica. They are regarded as citizens of Jamaica. All the privileges are there for them. So, you know, that's why I don't understand why the present administration there is bringing all kind of pressure on the government to say you have a state within a state. That is not in the Constitution, Jamaican Constitution. It's not a state in a state.
Yes.
A matter of fact, it said that there's no special grouping. And the Maroons are specially mentioned in our Constitution and the Rastafarians as groups, but they're all the citizens of Jamaica with all the privileges.
Yes.
So they shouldn't seek any special right as such.
Well, I certainly hope that you'll forgive me for referring to you as older heads like you will bring a certain amount of sobriety and balance with this kind of knowledge that you have, knowledge and experiential learning of what is possible, so that I suspect both the leadership of the Maroons and the leadership of Jamaica are younger people these days, and perhaps they do need to be better steeped in the history, you know, the lived history, the truth of the experience of our Jamaican people. Thank you so much, Sister Jennifer.
All right. And so, Rev, I am so happy to be part of this conversation. And I know we enjoy ourselves so much in the Reparations Task Force that we will be, you know, going full steam ahead with the programs we have. Just one or two quick comments, since time is not our friend. I do believe that the government is more than believe. The government has a responsibility to see to the housing and comfort of its citizens by making the conditions possible. But there's another part to the equation. It is to do with the responsibility of the individual, the families, and the communities. What do I mean by that? Some years ago, a particular building society, I will not name them, they had a strong advertising campaign, and they basically said, the same dollar that buys a pair of shoes is the same dollar that will eventually buy your house.
Yes.
And so it really invited persons to begin the matter seriously of beginning to save for a down payment. And it didn't matter if it was a small seed. If you had a little bit of money, bring it and come in. Now, I know it's a fact that many Jamaicans do not have any land. But a second fact, which sometimes is not so well remembered, is that some old-time Jamaican families really have land. But sometimes the taxes were never paid up because those who owned it died and the succeeding generations did not follow up, or people left the land in the country to come to town to work or to go to foreign or whatever. So I do believe that there are just so many circles and cycles within this conversation, so that I think families need more to begin to look at what they already own or what they have access to, and what the government arm of creating or clearing titles for land. What can you do if your family owns 10 acres or 15 acres of land? Your granny used to own it and your grandfather said, well, that piece is yours. How can you go to the government of Jamaica and begin to get ownership of land?
Yes.
And the final thing I would say is this. The matter of intergenerational wealth is to be taken seriously. Because what our grandparents worked for should not just be allowed to go to rack and ruin. During the month of July, we had the opportunity for family reasons to go to a couple of country districts. And it was just alarming how much land is being wasted and nobody is making use of it. And so people need to regard more carefully what the families already own and to see how they can begin to pass it on from one generation to the next. And so my final point is this. One of the things that our committee can include to its long list is to begin to facilitate intergenerational conversations. Today, in Torrington, a young woman said that last night, to celebrate August 6th, her family had an intergenerational conversation around matters concerning emancipendence.
Wonderful.
So if we You see, some families that have plenty land, you know, like the sugar owning land, the McConnells and such, they have these conversations all the time. And so their children learn to value what they have. Now, if what we have is bushland, it's still land.
Land.
So we're
Land.
No
not
more being made.
the labor of our generations past. We are to pull it together and see. So let us facilitate more intergenerational conversations. I really am delighted and honored to be part of this group and this conversation.
Amen.
Thanks, colleague
Amen.
Wisconsin.
More power, more freedom, and towards
Okay.
a fuller emancipation.
Yes.
Yes, Reverend Colin, closing comments.
Let me say three things. The first is to join my colleagues in saying how refreshing to know that the United Church itself has its own Reparation Task Force. This is everything that we had hoped when we started the process in CWM, that the member churches would take it on and would actually take it to the next level, because all of the issues must be made contextual if we're going to make any really significant impact.
Perfect.
And anything that CWM can do is going to be to support member churches to do better at what they believe God is calling them to do in context. And linked to that would be the comments that Marsha made around the actual meaning of reparation in a way that allow young people to buy into it. It is all part of the direction toward reconciliation, about which this series of conversations is about. That the word reparation essentially is to repair. That is at the core of what the word means, and it is to repair the breach. We can't but acknowledge that some breach to how we live as human beings has been committed. A crime, heinous crime against humanity, and that needs to be repaired. That we need to mend the brokenness that is taking place in society that robs us of the joy and the thrill and the privilege of living together as human beings. We need to build bridges of understanding and pave the path for a life of justice and peace for all people. So money is important, but beyond money is the whole, and part of what we're saying about what the money will do is to help us to get to that place. So everything we're talking about, from the land ownership to housing to better education for our children to better health care, all of these are part of what we believe need to happen in this country of ours. And those who have decimated the land, the area, must now help to make this repair happens in a way that allows us to live with dignity and pride. The second thing I want to say is that in Jennifer's presentation, and I've told her so, that this the turning around of the where there is life there is hope to where there is hope there is life is crucial. And that is something that we have to take on board and take very seriously, because it is hope that inspires life-giving action. And that hope, according to Augustine, says it has two cousins: it's anger and it's courage. Anger at the ugliness that we see all around us, and courage to do something about that. So hope is what this is all about. And that's why in my presentation I was talking about lamentation and laughter, which are actually sides of the same coin. That the lamentation, the pain and the heart brokenness, but the laughter, which is sometimes no more than grin and bear it, that kind of situation. And that for me is where hope lives. And it is important that with all the trouble that there is in the world that Bob Marley laments about, that we allow ourselves to be captured. We do not allow ourselves to be captured and controlled by the negative energy that will destroy us, but that he says it, we have got to face the day and we must give a little. So that's the second thing that I embrace, this notion that Jennifer helps us so helpfully to recognize, that it is not where there's life there's hope. But where there's hope, we continue to work, we continue to be inspired to push forward so that we together, with the courage to make a difference, can bring about a better Jamaica and a better world. And the third and final thing that I would like to say is that of all the things that CWM said it would do as a response to this hostile history of which we are a part, is that of creating institutional change by creating CWM culture and practices which dismantle the legacies and power issues of racism and patriarchy and inequality in our life, and enable us to better realize our vision of mutuality. Now, that for me is at the core of what our contribution to the reparation is all about. It is about the institutional changes that must happen so that the life of justice and peace might emanate. And that when that begins to happen, then the reconciliation that we need to experience will begin to happen. Because if we do not find a way to bring black and white, rich and poor, young and old together, if we don't find a way to bring that together, we are going to self-destruct. So it is critical that we appreciate that at the heart of this is how we bring humanity together again, and how humanity work together to bring the environment together so that it serves us and we serve it, so that all of us together can grow to be all that God intends us to be.
Amen.
Let us pray. A holy and righteous God, we draw near to you once again in thanksgiving and praise for your love made perfect in Jesus Christ, your Son, and for the privilege to embrace that love and to celebrate all that we have become as a result of your grace. We pause to confess where we have gone wrong and how we have spurned your love and your grace. But in this moment, Lord, we come so that you may help us to find our way back home, to repent, to return, so that we may walk in the path that you lead, and that we may together build a community where there is health, where there is fellowship, where there's generosity of spirit, where there's kindness towards one another, where there is a will to build, and that together we build a fabric in which all of us will find a place. Help us, O Lord, to give the best of who we are, and to expect the best from others, and to keep ourselves accountable to one another, so that we may enjoy the life, the fullness of life that Jesus Christ came to bring, and that in experiencing that flourishing, abundant life, we may know what it means to be part and parcel of your kingdom. Hear us, O Lord, as we pray, and open the path to life eternal for all your children, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
All church says, amen.
Amen.
May I seize the privilege of Deputy Chair to thank our chair so much for his unwavering belief in the possibility of this project. We met a few hiccups along the way, and he was able to really excite us. And we put our joint excitement together. And I would say, to God be the glory. And may God continue to just get this work to grow from strength to strength. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those gracious comments. And peace be with you and you all. Blessings all.